Hello and welcome, chess fans. This is Truxton analyzing the game between FIDE Master chiiwen and rdmuhcu. This game was played in round 5 on ICC's League 4545 in team event number 54 of the 5th round. And I'd like to congratulate rdmuhcu for winning this. This is the Game of the Week winner for round 5, so well done. This was a great game between two very strong players, and it was a positional game, very positional with a devastating attack at the end. So let's get right into it and see what happened here. So white opens up with e4 and black plays c5, offering Sicilian defense, and white elects for the open Sicilian with knight f3 and black plays knight c6, telling white that he wants to play a Sveshnikov or a Rossolimo or something like that. I think the two mainline moves here, or the moves that I see most often, are bishop to b5, and this is the Rossolimo where black is going to get some doubled pawns in the c file, possibly, or just pawn to d4. And we could possibly get a Lowenthal or a Sicilian Pelican or a Sveshnikov, really complicated games. But white decided not to go for that, and white played the move knight to c3. And the first thing I asked myself was, what does this move do? Or really, I should say to myself, what does it not do compared to the other two moves? Because the other two moves did specific things. The move bishop to b5, I think, stops the move pawn to e5. But I'm not sure. Let's look at it. So if bishop takes b5, if bishop takes knight, pawn takes bishop, the idea is that then we can take on e5, but I'm not so sure about it. If knight takes e5, what about queen d4? Hitting the knight and the pawn, kind of like similar ideas in the Rai Lopez, where white can't really take on e5 so easily. So maybe the move bishop b5 doesn't stop pawn to e5, but maybe it does for some other reason that I'm not thinking of, because I know that the move pawn to d4, which is the other move, stops pawn to e5. Well, temporarily anyway, because black will take it, and then white will take, and in this position we can see e5, and then the best response for white is to play knight to b5, or black can just play, knight f6, right? And then, wait a minute, knight f6, right, attacking the pawn on e4, and if knight c3, we see e5, knight b5, and maybe d6 will be played. This is the main line Sveshnikov, where white gets an outpost on d5, and black has a weak d6 pawn, but the bishop pair. And you'll see in this game, similar kind of pawn structure happens where black does get a pawn on d6. But let's see what happens here. So white played knight c3. And if I was black, I'd be out of book here. I'm not sure what I would do. But what black did was he played pawn to e5. And this move immediately tells white that black is going to have a problem piece. This bishop on f8 is going to be trapped in by pawns on dark-colored squares. And so let's see here. So after bishop c4, getting the bishop on a very useful diagonal, we see pawn to d6. Now, if I was white, I would do everything that I can to stop black from exchanging off this bishop right here. And the reason is that bishop, if it sits there on e7, it could be in the way of a lot of different plans and ideas that black wants to accomplish. I'm not sure if it's possible to prevent the trade, because what black wants to do is he wants to put his bishop on e7 and then over here to g5. And there really isn't, I think, a reasonable way to stop that I looked at it for a couple of minutes, and I guess that if this knight was able to hop over here, over here to h3, and in combination with this bishop, maybe enough pieces can control g5. But it seems like white's too slow in doing that, because that's bishop e7 and bishop g5 is coming in one move. So the only reasonable response then would be pawn to h4 if you wanted to stop this bishop g5. But this move pawn to h4, it's just just to stop bishop to g5, it might not be entirely justified. Now, this move pawn to h4 might be playable, but then again it might not. If black plays bishop e7, there's immediately two attackers on h4, and there's only two defenders, and it's going to be hard for white to castle without losing this pawn. So I'm not sure if it's possible to prevent this maneuver here, which exchanges off black's worst piece, but maybe there is. It requires some analysis. Maybe white will have to sacrifice a pawn by moving this knight and then playing f4. I don't know. I'm not really sure. But anyway, let's move on here. So we see pawn to d3, and that develops this guy. Bishop to e7, knight d2, and then there's his idea with bishop to g5, exchanging off his bad piece. Knight f1, he takes, white retakes, and we see knight e7. Now, what I'd like to note is that white made a very, very good maneuver. I'm going to call it a good maneuver because it makes a lot of sense. His knight was on f3, and it went from f3 to d2, and d2 to f1, and now his idea is to hop over here to e3. And the knight on e3 is good because it controls the strong square d5. But in this position, with black already traded off his bad dark squared bishop, what matters then is what can black do about the d5 square. So after knight e3, let's just look at it and let's ask ourselves what's going on here. If black just wanted to concentrate his efforts on the d5 square, white has 1, 2, 3 potential pieces that can occupy or control d5. And black has 1, 2, 3 potential pieces that can control or occupy d5. So I don't see a very easy way for white to really permanently get a piece on d5. But what he is doing is he's controlling the square in front of black's weak d6 pawn. So it's very, very logical, and it's kind of constraining. But like I said, since black got rid of that piece, he's a little bit easier to develop. And if we go back a move, black played the move knight to e7. And I like that move because the knight on f6, what's it going to do on f6? On e7, it might support an idea of castling and then putting the king on h8 and then playing f5 for whatever that's worth. So this move, knight e7, is strong. What he ended up doing with it in the game was he ended up actually putting it on g6, and then it headed over to the strong f4 square. So let's move on. Knight e3, castle, knight g6, and then white goes ahead and plops a piece on d5. I think the reason why he did that was he wants to control f4, and he wants to play pawn to c3 to take out this d4 square from black's knight. Queen g5, strong move. Let's go ahead and threaten some shenanigans with minor pieces against white's king. King to h1, rook to b8. Okay, so what black wants to do is he wants to push forward and gain space on the queen side, maybe try to tickle this light squared bishop on c4. You know, this move b5 is going to happen if white doesn't stop it. He does with a4, and we see pawn to h5. Okay, so this move pawn to h5, is that justified? And I think it absolutely is, because if you just look at this kind of position, there's a lot of pieces that can potentially swing over to white's king side that black owns. You know, this bishop, this knight, the rook, these guys are already over there. So, you know, potentially it looks like all of black's army can potentially swing over to white's king side to try to assault the king. Now, his idea with h5 is to push it all the way over here to h3, and then disrupt white's king side pawn structure, and then, you know, his pieces are just going to crush white. So that's the basic idea, and let's see what white does about it. So he plays c3, and his idea is he wants to play queen f3 in response to a pawn on h3, because let's say, for example, well, black did push, and now white played queen f3. Now, does this move queen f3 stop pawn to h3? If you want to, go ahead and pause the video and find out for yourself. Does queen f3 stop pawn to h3? Okay, welcome back. You've resumed, and queen f3, I think, does stop pawn to h3, because if pawn to h3, now I haven't checked any of this with a computer, so you know, this is just from my own analysis, and I think that if pawn to h3, then white can just take it, because after knight h4, the idea is that, you know, if the queen goes, you know, back, then we're going to mate on g2. But the queen doesn't have to go back. We can play queen g3, and you know, how is black going to win this pawn on h3? If we exchange queens, then after capturing, I guess we would capture with the f pawn to stop knight f3. So capture with the f pawn, the knight will have to go back, and then we can either defend the pawn on h3 with the king, or just push it forward. I'm not sure which one is best, but either way, white's up a pawn here. So this move, queen f3, does stop pawn to h3. And so we see bishop d7, bishop a2. This was a very accurate move, bishop to a2. And this was one of the reasons why I chose this game as the game of the week winner for round 5. It was very precise in the way it was played. So this move, bishop to d7, threatens some things. Let's say that white burned a move and played rook to g1. Then black is going to play knight a5. And now there's nothing that white can do to prevent the exchange of this piece for this piece. Because if we move the bishop back, then black is going to take on a4. So this move, bishop a2, is accurate because white wants to keep this piece on the board. And what's funny about that, there's a nice positional idea behind that. So if you see, white's center pawns on e4 and d3 are on the light-colored square, and he has a light-squared bishop, which he had just said to black he wants to keep by putting it on a2. Now, technically, this is a bad light-squared bishop, but this light-squared bishop performs a function, a very key function. First of all, the bishop controls d5. Second of all, it's on a very, very nice diagonal towards the black king. So, even though the bishop is technically bad, because its mobility is limited by the pawns that are on light-colored squares, it's still a good bishop because it performs a very valuable function. So that's why white wanted to keep the bishop. And so we see knight f4, going to go ahead and put a piece on f4. It looks like a pretty natural move. It prepares to play pawn to h3, right? You know, this knight is supporting the h3 square. So white takes it, and black retakes. And this is a very common thing that I've seen happen before. I've even seen this kind of thing happen in my games, where the pawn on e5 swings over here to f4, and then black is able to get a knight on e5 where the pawn was. And that knight on e5 is very, very strong. E5 is a good square to have the knight in a position like this. So the move knight d5, I guess that makes sense to me. I wanted to go ahead and play knight c4, reason being, to attack the pawn on d6 and to control the e5 square. But, the move knight d5 is very natural because it puts the knight more advanced in the black territory. The knight on c4 is less advanced and less active than the knight on d5. But the knight on c4 stops black from playing knight e5. Well, it doesn't really stop him from playing it. He can still play it, because if knight e5, if we take on e5, then black will just retake. But maybe white should have traded those knights off. But the positional problem with trading the knights off is that black has a very, very nice light-squared bishop. Well, first of all, this bishop is attacking a4. I didn't even see that. Okay. Anyway, so ignoring the fact that black can take this pawn, just looking at the position, black's center pawns are all on dark-colored squares, and white's center pawns are on light. And the only minor pieces left on the board are the bishops. And technically, black has a better light-squared bishop. So probably he has a better game here. But if we go back to the main line, yeah, okay, so I don't understand. Okay, so white played knight d5 and black played bishop e6. Can he just win this pawn on a4? Is that worth it? Because if knight e5, then what? Oh, okay, we just take on f4, right. That's what white was doing with knight d5, duh. He was telling black that if you play knight e5, I'm going to take the pawn on f4. Okay, that's clear. Alright, glad we looked at that, alright. So, in this position, black realized that he cannot play knight e5. Again, a precise thing to realize. So he played bishop to e6, and what that does is it pins down this knight on d5, because if the knight ever moves, then this bishop is going to take on a2. So that's a pretty annoying pin there. Yeah, I'm not sure. Probably black is better here. So now that this knight is pinned, I guess now black can go ahead and play knight e5 when he wants to. Alright, so let's see what happened. White played queen to d1. And when I saw this at first, it just looked a little odd to me at first glance. Why would white bring his queen back to d1 when his queen was performing a function on f3 by stopping black from playing pawn to h3? But the reason is that he absolutely had to. There was really no other logical move. Maybe queen e2 would have been better than queen d1, but I'm not really sure. But the main idea is that white can't do anything about knight to e5, and after knight to e5 happens, he doesn't want to respond to knight e5 with moving the queen, because then black can get pawn to f3 as a tempo move, I think. I'm pretty sure that might be the reason. So he just went ahead and moved the queen back. And so we see rook to c8. I don't understand rook to c8. Honestly, I don't get it. I thought about it for a minute or two. Maybe the players can help me understand that move. I was thinking that since the queen went back to d1, maybe black can go ahead and play pawn to h3, which was his idea. But maybe not. Let's see. If pawn to h3, and then we play pawn takes pawn, black plays bishop takes pawn, and now he's threatening a checkmate and the rook. So we have to play rook g1. What's black going to do? Let's say black plays queen h4, and then white plays queen f3. Um, the reason for queen f3 is to defend f2 and to attack f4. Maybe that's why Black played rook c8. Maybe he played it because he couldn't really play h3 yet. But let's go back to the main line. So rook c8, and white deemed it necessary to put a pawn on h3 himself. So I don't know if this move rook to c8 allowed black to play pawn to h3. There might be some kind of plan or some kind of tactic that I'm missing, because I don't see how rook to c8 allows black to play pawn to h3. Maybe white felt like he just had to play that move, but it just seems like if you have to play something like that, that you're really going to be in trouble, because now we've got a target after h3. This guy is looking at h3 always, and when this pawn moves, when this pawn goes to f3, then the defender of the h3 pawn is going to be removed. So it just seems like tactics are going to happen and flow here. Let's see what happens. So we see pawn up to f5, and this was I really like this move, because what it does is it gains space on the king side, and what black wants to do is black wants to attack white's king, but he needs a little bit more over there to really do that. So this move is good because it plans to open up lines on the king side. So we see f3 just hanging on to that pawn on e4. Pawn takes e4. Pawn takes e4. I think that was the right way to capture with the d pawn. Seems like, by capturing with the f pawn, then white is asking for black to play a pawn to f3 sometime in the future. Okay, so we take that way, and now we see knight e5. Just going ahead and getting the knight there. It's a really good square. I don't understand queen d2, but I'm really just not sure. Oh, queen d2. Maybe the idea is to put pressure on the pawn on f4, and maybe it's gonna to make it hard for black to use this rook. You know what I mean? Like if this rook ever decides to swing over here to g6, then we'll take on f4. I don't know. I'm not sure. Okay, so this move, pawn to c4, I think that was a pretty good move. But what it does do, so black went ahead and played c4. So what c4 does is it tells white that I'm going to put a knight in your face. I'm going to put a knight on d3. And any knight on the third rank is actually in the strongest location. That is, it controls the most amount of squares in the enemy camp. The knight on the third rank is actually stronger than a knight on the second rank. And that's a very general statement. And obviously, you need to analyze each position in particular to really say that. But in general, a knight on the third rank is a very, 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 very strong piece. What it also does, this pawn to c4 move, is it neglects the d4 square. Because when the pawn moves forward, now white can potentially get a knight on d4. So, or a piece on d4. So, you got to give a little to get a little. And in this situation, I think getting the d3 square is more important than losing the d4 square. So, rook d1, that move is because black was threatening, knight d3, so you might as well move the rook. Rook c5, just getting all your pieces into the fight. If these two guys move, then this rook is going to come join the fight somewhere in the 5th rank. Knight b4, rook d8, this is all logical. Knight c2. Okay, so white's not afraid of black playing knight d3 here. Reason being, if knight d3, I think that white can just play knight e1. And what was the point of knight d3 if white can just play knight e1? so black doesn't play knight d3 yet. Let's go ahead and bring this bishop back and get ready for a knight d4 that's going to come later. So, another reason why I really liked this game was because a lot of the moves that were played were very, very precise. But you know what? Maybe this move bishop to f7 isn't the best. And the reason why I'm thinking that is maybe the bishop is better on this diagonal that it's already on. It attacks h3. But obviously, this move that he played, bishop f7, now maybe this bishop can come over here to this diagonal. So the question is, which diagonal is better for that bishop? So, maybe this one is over here because it really puts pressure on the pawn on e4, and if black is ever going to break with a d5 push, then maybe this bishop will be pretty useful in that function. So we see knight d4, rook a5 attacking the pawn and defending the pawn, d5 going ahead and eliminating that weakness. So I think that once black is able to eliminate that weak pawn on d6, I think it's pretty clear that black has really done a good job in this opening. b4, telling the rook to go away. Rook a6, a5. I'm not really sure why a5 is played, but I think the reason is that white anticipates black to play bishop to e8, attacking this pawn on a5. And maybe, white just went ahead and played a5 to get that over and done with. So we see a5, rook d6. Man, look at this pressure here with these two rooks just gleaming down the d-file. Gonna get ready to take on e4. I mean, this is just super, super strong, I think, for black. Okay, so I think that this is where white went wrong. This move, knight to b5, okay. It's logical in the fact that it forks a rook and the pawn on a7. Okay, but it's really not logical because it takes a lot of time to do this. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 moves. Okay, it takes 4 moves to gobble the pawn on a7 and then hobble back to d4. Now, that's a very, very long time in a position like this where black is getting ready to crush the center of the board. And also I'd like to note, this knight on d4, it really performs a very, very valid function. And that function is the f3 square. Because after black takes on e4 and white retakes on e4, then black is threatening in a lot of lines to play pawn to f3. And if this knight is on d4, it's much more difficult to do that. So the reason why I think that this is where white really went wrong with knight to b5 is that it just takes too much time to take on a7 and then hobble back to d4 where it's needed. And you'll see in the rest of this game, the knight was on a7 for the remainder of the game. And that's happened to me before so many times, where I put a knight or I put a bishop or something to take. Well, really, the knight is the best example because the knight on the rim is grim. And that statement is so true because the knight just doesn't do anything over there on a7. And it takes a really, really long time to take that pawn on a7, which the pawn on a7 has nothing to do with the position whatsoever on this in the center and in the king side. So I think that this move, knight to b5, was an attempt to lure black away from the action. But, this knight belonged on d4. if you were going to move the knight, maybe over here to f5 is better, because it seems like maybe we can take that pawn. So, maybe taking the pawn on h4 is a better idea than taking the pawn on a7. But let's move on. So we see knight b5. I'm going to say knight b5 question mark. Question mark, exclamation point, I don't know. Probably bad. All right, knight b5, rook d7, and then we get the pawn. And then black takes, so he's immediately ripping open the center. And so white decides to decrease the pressure. That's logical. Black retakes, and then white plays bishop to b1. Going ahead and pinning that pawn, because if black takes, then white is going to do some nasty things with a queen to h7, I guess. But black plays this good move, bishop g6, and now I think white's hurting. After pawn takes e4, we see this move f3. And this would not have been able to be played if the knight was on d4. So this move f3 is strong. I think it's a really good move. So let's see what happened here. White played rook f2. I think the reason why he played that is, let's see what black is threatening with this f3. If we take on f3, I think black can play queen g3, and that attacks this pawn and that pawn, right? But can white defend it? Let's see. Queen g2, trying to defend everything. Now what? Now what can black do? Yeah, I'm not sure. So what is black threatening with the move f3? If we take on f3, what's black going to do? Maybe, let me look at this again. Queen g3, queen g2, queen takes queen check, king takes queen, rook d2 check, rook f2. I don't know. I'm not sure, guys. I really don't know. Pawn takes f3. Now what? If knight takes f3, rook takes knight. Oh, now? Wait a minute. I don't know. I'm not sure. Maybe the players can tell us. What was the real threat behind pawn to f3? Maybe we can get a nice discussion in the forum about it. Okay, so white played rook f2, and then black took on g2 with check, and then white retook on g2. In this position, black found an absolutely amazing forced tactic, which I didn't see at first. I mean, it's just absolutely bonkers to me what happened. Okay, so go ahead and pause the video, because this is problem number 1 or problem number 2 or something. Find a winning solution. Okay, you're back. I welcome you all back. Now, in this position, black can just crush white with the move bishop takes e4. Ouch. And everything from here on out is absolutely forced. After queen takes bishop, we're going to see rook d1 check, and the only move for white is to play king h2, forced move. And I think this is what white missed. Black can play this brilliant move, knight f3 check, ouch. And again, the only move it's forced is to play queen takes knight. And then we see queen e5 check, ouch. And the only move is to play rook g3. Okay, and so after rook g3, we see pawn takes rook check. And again, the only move is to play king g2. If you play queen takes g3, then we play rook d2 check, and the queen falls. Ouch. So the only move after pawn takes rook is to move the king there, and then we see rook d2 check, and the only move is to play king g1, because after a move like king f1, like in this position, white can move the king to 3 squares, so he has to choose one. And if white plays king f1, then we lose the queen immediately, so let's dismiss that idea. If white plays king h1, then there's going to be a checkmate after queen e1 check, and now, you know, white can go ahead and sacrifice his queen, but he's not going to get anything for it because there's going to be a checkmate. So the only move is to bring the king back, and now it's pretty trivial. You can see queen e1 check, and the only move, like I keep saying the only move because this is absolutely forced. It's just that the tree is really, really long. So we see queen f1, and now queen e3. Ouch. And, you know, the game's over. The game is absolutely over here. After the only move, king h1, we see a checkmate. Boom. There's the checkmate. So this was an absolutely great game. And I want to congratulate rdmuhcu for playing this against the FIDE master, chiiwen. It was very, very complicated. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back to the beginning, and I'm not going to say anything, but what I am going to do is I'm just going to scroll through the moves kind of at a reasonable pace, and that way we can kind of review the game once more, because it was fairly complicated. So back to the beginning. I'm not going to say a lot. I'm just going to scroll through the moves just so you guys can see it one more time. Okay, so I'm not sure about knight c3. You know, I don't know the lines, but it looks okay. It looks reasonable. And now look at black's plan with exchanging off this dark squared bishop. That's absolutely key, I think, to black's game. Look how white maneuvers this knight to the more beautiful e3 square. Oh man, this plan of just coming down here is so strong. Very accurate move. Gonna play queen f3 in response to a pawn on h3. Let's threaten this pawn and threaten to exchange off some wood that might be beneficial for black. I'm not sure if this move was required. You know, I really don't know. Look at this pressure on the e-file. And like I said, I think this is where white went wrong. Knight b5 just, I don't know, just takes too much time to do this, I think. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe there's a way that white can hold on here to the extra pawn, but I doubt it. f3, strong move, I think. I'm not sure, you know, like I said, I think I'm missing something. I'm not sure if white can take here. Yeah, that's something for the players to tell us. Can white take on f3? Maybe there's some sort of refutation. I don't know. But white didn't take. Ouch! And there's the tactic. All right, in this position, his tactic is like a million moves long, and it's all forced. But the tree gets pretty wide. Like, remember when I was saying like that? There's three options. When the king was here, the king could go there, there, or there. That's like 6 moves away or something. And to play bishop takes e4, you had to figure that out. So, so kudos to rdmuhcu for finding this. Now I haven't checked it with an engine. I haven't checked it yet, so I really don't know if it's maybe we're missing something. But from my analysis, it looks absolutely fine. Also, maybe this move queen e3 is strong. Queen to e3. Reason being, you're threatening to play queen takes h3 check and bishop takes e4, followed up with a nice rook d1. So queen to e3 might also be strong here. Now that I look at it, but the move that he played is just absolutely just so visually appealing. Bishop takes e4. Ouch. Okay. Queen takes, and now this forced series of moves here that had to be well calculated, a nice knight sacrifice. So he sacrificed both of his minor pieces here for this mating attack. Ouch. Oh, he got a rook back. Okay. But then he gets the king. Oh, man, this is so good. Wow, what a game. And now white resigned. Wow. Okay, well done. You won Game of the Week, and you deserved it. FIDE Master chiiwen, you played a tough game. Maybe this maneuver with your knight going over here to a7 is what did you in, but, I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe the position was just too hard, So maybe go back to the drawing board with this whole idea with knight c3 in the opening. It was a great game, and I hope you all learned from this. I sure did. And enjoy the rest of your day, guys. Bye.